Really excited to join with the panelists today to talk about something that is at once incredibly important, but a bit ambiguous. And it's exactly why we come together for forums like this to actually talk about how can we clarify our terminology? How can we focus on things that are successful and that add value and not get distracted by some of the mess in conversation? We're here today to talk about data ecosystems and how they can drive climate action. And I'm joined by incredible panelists that you'll hear from. We introduce them in order as their comments go through. But I want to start off with one question, which is the old adage that, of course, we've all heard: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is great, something we can all nod along. But then think about this week. Alarm bells are going off with climate. We're seeing more and more desire for urgency, for action. We're seeing more and more of a drive, let's do it ourselves. Let's do this alone. Why do data ecosystems still matter? Why should we be focused on ecosystem work in an age of climate urgency?
Oh, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a stab. These seats are super comfortable. Very dangerous. No, it's a great question. Thank you, Evan, and thank you, MasterCard, for Inclusive Growth, for inviting us here to have this conversation, all of these important conversations. So, does everyone in the room remember decades ago when Deep Blue captured the minds and the imagination in terms of pop culture, in terms of AI and what AI could do? And then let's fast forward decades to ChatGPT. Now, we know that there have been AI discoveries between those times, but we're talking sort of capturing the imagination, the zeitgeist, and pop culture. Those were decades between those two innovations. Just early September, researchers in Zurich, many of you may have read or heard about this, researchers in Zurich for the first time created a drone that won a drone racing contest just using AI alone against human drone racers. Speeds up with 50 miles per hour and accelerations going to upwards of 5 Gs, right? We're now seeing AI discoveries and innovations at a clip that we haven't seen before. They're going to be coming fast and furious and consistent. And we've heard this before. Remember, there was the generational catastrophes, climate catastrophes, right? Every 1,000 years, we get a certain climate catastrophe, and now we see it speeding up at a clip that we can't keep up with. AI innovation and discoveries are speeding up, are coming out, will be coming out monthly, weekly, very likely, with the investment. I'm a former employee of NVIDIA, and so I understand this very well. We need to build relationships, partnerships, ecosystems in order to harness these innovations that are coming out faster and more furious, in order to use those innovations to have the impact in the climate and nature space. And we can't do this just one-off. We have to systematize this engagement between AI and climate. There are great organizations like WRI and others, DataKind, that are doing these things, but we have to build systems in order to tackle this, in order to harness these new innovations that are coming out monthly now to have an impact in this space.
It's amazing. Go ahead, Brigitte. No, please.
Yeah, and I think to do that, requires sort of finding a coordinated point at which we can meet that need, right? So we have this stuff flying at us, and we can make a choice, right, about whether we're going to individually try to catch that ball, catch that rocket train, and then in our own capacity sort of work on that individual problem, or build like a really wide net that can actually allow that to diffuse into the work that we're doing in ways that are sort of most effective and most efficient. One thing I've been thinking a lot about this week is just to this urgency point is, how do we not take steps backwards? How do we not repeat each other's work? How do we start from the starting point that we're already at in these conversations, in the work that's happening, rather than continuing to spin our wheels? Because to your point, we don't have really time to do that. We don't have time to do it from a planetary or a societal perspective, and the technology is also coming at us fast. And so thinking about ways that we can actually build ecosystems. And I just want to acknowledge, right, we have been talking about collaboration and coordination in the social sector for eons, right? It is hard. So I would love to, we'll talk, I think, a little bit about some of the ways that we think it could work, but I also think we have to remain optimistic and not kind of roll our eyes in kind of collaboration or ecosystem. Okay, yeah, sure, I've had this conversation before, because I think that there is a different opportunity here in this moment where actually coming together is potentially more efficient than it's been before, where capitalizing on that opportunity will actually show kind of innate returns. Societal and kind of people collaboration is pretty hard, right? We know that's going to still need to happen. But technological integration and data integration is relatively easy, right? Like we know how to do that. We see it happening all the time in the commercial space and in other spaces. And so one of the things I'm trying to remind myself as someone who has also rolled their eyes at the sort of conversation around let's collaborate more is to try to flip the frame here and really think about how investing in ecosystems will allow us to literally create new solutions that would not have been possible before. And I think that's the opportunity in front of us right now.
It's powerful. Florent.
I think let's just start with remembering the Earth is one ecosystem, right? We're all in this together. I could hear a little bit of a provocative, go fast, go together, and there's a lot of people going alone. But I think if we remember that we're all in this together, beyond the competition in all our systems and in the economies of the startup and so on, we're all in this together. That's the first point. And I want to highlight that because, the organization I represent today here is Acción Andina, who is a continental scale intent effort driven by local communities and local leaders in the Andes of South America, at the very top of the Andes, restoring native forest ecosystems for water security, essentially. Glaciers are melting, water security is becoming a big issue. Glaciers, unfortunately, will be gone in a few decades. The only natural substitute for water security will be ecosystems, native forests, wetlands, peatlands. We've grown over the last 5 years from an intent of a few hundred people to roughly 30,000 people today, actively on the ground doing activities from reforestation to forest conservation and so on. The only way this was made possible at first was a powerful collective narrative of possibility, of change, of hope. It was sort of that collective narrative across an entire continent, 7 countries, but today in 5 countries, was only possible with data or information, let's say, that was able to craft and support that common narrative, right? And so our co-founder, Constantino Auca, who is a selected champion of the Earth by UNEP last year for his marvelous work, he understood 2 things. One, forests can be brought back and ecosystems as well through practical measures. Most importantly, second, he understood in his indigenous communities, there are ancestral principles. It's the ex-Inca Empire, if you want to put it that way, that you have in society to call for moments of greater good and greater works. So he's able, it's called Aini and Minka. It's a powerful principle. Everybody shows up and do the work together. And he was able to revive that to actually bring people to address one of the biggest challenges now, climate change and water security. And so what it means in practical terms, he was able to call on thousands and thousands of people, now 10,000s of people, and will need to go much more. And the advantage, or the reason I think why it worked so wonderfully, and it was a growth over the last 5 years that I'm still super honored to be part of and surprised at times, was because that common narrative, he tapped into an ecosystem that is ecologically connected, one higher ecosystem across the Andes, that is culturally deeply connected. It's the same people that have the same past, and socially super connected. Same challenges, economically as well. And so ending with, if we can use data, whatever form of new ways of handling data with AI and so on, and trust the experts much, much more, to really support those collective efforts across the world in different regions, but then overall in the planet. That's really, I think, what we're here to do. And so the competition in it, great. but we need to think bigger and think ecosystem is, the Earth is one ecosystem, we're all in this together, and the marvelous competition engine that we have in most Western society can be good, but let's not lose sight of what we're here to do together.
Amazing. And I think that gets to one practical point about working in collaboration, finding the narrative, having the data to support the narrative, and then driving towards that. I'm interested, maybe starting with Brigitte, what are some other tools in your toolkit for collaboration? You've built partnerships, you work across government, private sector, social sector. What's in your toolkit when you enter a new problem and you want to build a collaborative solution?
So one tool that we just kind of relaunched in the last week that was built by a collection of engineers across the company at Google is called Data Commons. We launched it this week, a new UN Data Commons for the SDGs in partnership with the US Statistics Division to really explore that data. But it's essentially trying to build, for technical folks, a knowledge graph for data ecosystem in the world. And it is essentially allowing us to put public data sets into one place. Okay, we've done that before, great. But in a way that allows you to simply interoperate them without having to do a lot of extra coding. So really trying to bring down the barriers that exist to trying to use data and operate in a data ecosystem. And then what I'm really excited about is, using obviously some of the advances that we've talked a lot about this week in AI and machine learning. They built a natural language front end to that. So you can actually you can query that data in the language that you are actually using to ask a question. And I think I'm hopeful, right? This is a really powerful way to unlock data insights for many, many more people, right? You don't need to go get a data science to run some R. You can just type in the question that you're asking yourself and get an answer. Now, this is a great example of something that is as powerful as what we put into it. So in having more data sets that are in the correct schema, a relatively simple process, and by the way, getting easier with machine learning. We were talking about some of this with our DataKind colleagues, thinking about ways that we can kind of pool that information together, but in a way that's not the old version of that, right? Where we used to say, okay, well, we have to get it into a central database, and those are disk drives that have to sit together. This is now all sitting where it's sitting, and pulled in the same way that we've sort of used in search. So I'm excited about that as a tool, hopefully. And this is active development. So if folks are using it and finding it's not working, that team is very open to feedback. You can reach out to me. I'll put you in touch. And then I'll maybe just highlight one other quick example, which is kind of the other side of this, right? Which is the human piece that we talked about. We had the privilege of working at the early days with what has come to be a coalition known as Climate Trace. It's a collection of organizations, researchers, and nonprofits who have now built a real-time data mapping of greenhouse gas emissions from human sources globally. It's the first of its kind in many ways. We've been a long time using really outdated data to understand how we're doing on things like the Paris Agreement. And I won't go into all of it. I encourage folks to check it out. First of all, it's incredible work that they're doing. It's gone from kind of national into subnational and even point source type data across everything from shipping to plants to power. But what I think has been really remarkable is they actually didn't do this work by standing up a new organization at all. We have funded money across, and as have others, money across the board. And the way that they did this was sort of by starting in one place, and then they actually had a lot of folks kind of reach out and say, hey, we're kind of trying to map this in shipping, and we're kind of trying to do this over here. How might we work together? And I have run this pretty miraculous, I feel, coalition. And what it took really was one person especially, Gavin McCormick, who is the head of an organization called Watt Time, who started this work on power, essentially kind of backgrounding his own kind of role in the work and doing the really critical sort of diplomacy that's required to say, okay, what are the principles we can all agree to? Can we all get behind this vision? And so I think those are really two totally different tools, right? One is literally maybe the most technical thing you can imagine. And the other is just having someone who is willing to kind of put their own energy in for the sake of that greater vision. I've been encouraging for a long time, you need to write up, I don't know if writing up a case study is that helpful, but there is something to be learned from that experience. And we need to see more of it on climate, especially right now, as we think about how we can build not 25 versions of insights across the globe, but ideally one aggregated view that still allows each of those individual organizations to keep doing the critical work that they're doing on their topic while contributing to this kind of public data good.
Yeah, I love the wisdom there, and that humility can actually be a tool for collaboration at the same time as good data infrastructure and standards and all the boring stuff that is amazing, keeps our world spinning. And how about you? What's in your toolkit for collaboration? What do you bring to the table there?
So I'll go back to my days. So at one point in my life, I was the chief analytics officer for New York City under de Blasio's first term. And when I came in, it was right after Sandy, speaking of these, once every 1,000, year storms that are happening far more frequent than that. Sandy happened. I don't know how many New Yorkers are in the crowd, but we'll remember it was total chaos. And I should also say, since I don't work for the city government anymore, it was also chaos internally in the city in terms of data and sharing across agencies. And so when I came in, Mayor Bloomberg did an after-action report, and part of that after-action report basically said, the office that I ran, the Mayor's Office for Data and Analytics, had to be more thoughtful around data sharing across these agencies. And so you go to each agency, and I can say this now, they aren't as collaborative as we would want agencies to be. Agencies are good at solving their problem, tackling their mission. They're not as good as working together to solve a larger challenge or an emergency that crops up. So one of the things that we decided to do, so I took a page from the Office of Emergency Management where they would bring the heads of agencies around the table and then talk about this big catastrophe, and each agency head had to then share with the first deputy mayor how their agency was going to play a role solving that problem. What I did was took the data leads from every agency, brought them in the room, concocted a real catastrophe, and said, let's go around the room, and each person has to now talk about what data they have and what data they're willing to share in order to engage and solve this particular emergency. And so we would do those once a month. What's important about that is that we weren't trying to solve a problem. We were actually trying to surface all of the knotty, scary, concerning issues that would normally come up during the emergency and we wouldn't have a way to solve it, but surface them now. So for instance, in an emergency, and many of you who may remember, New York City was sued because during Sandy, they didn't respond to people who had disabilities and who had health challenges in the way that they needed to. And so the city was sued because of that. Why? Because when you go to DOH, and you say, DOH, give us all of the data you have on people with disabilities and so on and so forth. And DOH says what? We can't, because of HIPAA. We can't share it. And we don't have privacy protocols in place. Our databases are secure, but yours aren't, so we can't give it to you, but it's an emergency, right? So how do we answer those questions prior to the emergency? So again, when we started, I've been working with Dan Farris, and he's somewhere in and around here. There he is in the back at WashU. He has an amazing institute, the Data Science Institute at WashU, that focuses on using data for social impact. And I've been working with his team to think through how do we take the same concept of data drills and apply them in that space. But again, the key tool here is not trying to solve a problem. It's actually to surface all of the data challenges that we think or will likely happen when we do come to the table to solve a problem. So get out in front, and I think that's a key tool.
Excellent. Thank you for that insight and that very practical thing we could all do this afternoon. We're getting close to time. This conversation can go forever. You all are a wealth of knowledge. But I want to direct the last question to Florent and your work on the ground. We're obviously here in New York. We're an incredible company. We have incredible companies on the stage and institutions and philanthropies. How does this look like from the ground? Like, what can we all do to be better partners to organizations that are in communities that are doing the difficult work every day? How can we make that collaboration feel honest, collaborative, open, what you need from the sort of global community?
Thank you. Very good question. I think I'll weave that into the toolbox element or question that you asked before. One, I already mentioned it, that collective narrative, and that if that can be supported by data at any given point, It's becoming powerful. There's the powerful spiritual side of collective narrative, and there's the informed data structure to support decisions around it. One. We've adopted a bit of a guiding principle of radical transparency in the work that we do. And in the context of NGOs, in South America, in that regard, that is not an easy thing to do. We were terrified at the beginning, sharing all the budgets that we have with all the partners that are together in the collective initiative. How would they react? Is that driving competition, or is that a collective force? And what happened was wonderful. People, by seeing all the data from the other partners together in this collective initiative, were actually supercharged by, let's do more together. How did you grow from that point to that point? What could you do actually to make that happen? And so it allowed collaboration to occur within that same collective vision of collaboration at a much more effective level. There is a challenge. Ultimately, we're restoring a public good in South America. I would like to think, and it's challenging, that we could fund a lot of the work that we do through public institutions at some point. We all know South America, there's a lot of missing capacities in every level. There's corruption, there's many different things. I hope I don't step on any feet here. It's a reality. So if we can demonstrate by data, whether it's from the ground on the ecological side of things or financial flows of money into the countries or from within the countries, to understand how much money is available for these types of funds, where and how can we use it, then we can actually empower our local partners together with amazing other strategic institutions to actually challenge the status quo and say, I don't know, Peru, I think, had several, dozens of millions available for restoration. There's not one single project being implemented. Where's that money going? If we can actually show data, make the case, help our local partners to actually be empowered to go to their government and say, well, you're hungry for our data on how we report on your national goals. Why don't we close the link? So anyway, so there's a lot of things where with radical transparency, access to more data, and there is a smart, I think, middle ground for intermediaries that have the power to moderate and share the data and present it in a way that is digestible to different stakeholders, we can actually transform things that seem stuck and have seemed stuck for decades. And that's something we would love in South America to work on, to actually unlock the powerful public funding, multilateral funding and especially also with companies in the region. If they understand how much water they are benefiting from the restoration work that people in the high Andes do, they will have all the incentive to invest into those. And there is a big data, missing data sort of transaction in that conversation. And that's part of the work, and we should do much more on that and partner with powerful partners that could help us. Anyway, that's the same point, basically, but yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. And thank you, Brigitte and Florent and Aman, for your time, for your wisdom. I know many folks want to connect with you after, so thanks again, and turn it back over to Arturo.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Thank you.